Welcome, everybody, to the Soul of the Unexplained. We have got one heck of a doozy of a show for you folks today. Of course, my name is Jim. That's Jim with two M's. One, two, count them. Yeah, baby, that is moi. Thank you so much. And joining me, as always, is my dear friend, my brother from another mother, my Soul of the Unexplained co creator and co host, the inimitable and irrepressible Mr. Roger Stokes. How you doing, Raj?
Hey everyone, I'm doing great. Jim, you used a lot of big words right there for me. I'm going to have to look those up and see if that actually equates to something that I am. I do know that one thing is that I am not misanthropic. So, with that, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Soul of the Unexplained. Super excited to have you here tonight. We're going to cover a wide range of topics and Jim, let me just be real with our viewers here. We really wanted to do the 5 minutes Skinwalker Ranch season 5. There is so much going on right now, not only in these episodes, but in the UFO sphere world, UAPs. We just needed to sit down and we made the decision to actually discuss a lot of these things because honestly, 5 minutes just wouldn't do it justice. And we want to bring the best content to you, our viewers. So I hope that you guys are okay with some longer episodes here, talking about not only Skinwalker Ranch, the most recent one, season 5, but also with some of the events that are unfolding right now, real time in the news.
Absolutely. So, as Roger said, folks, today, to start off, we're going to recap. We're going to give you a nice recap of episode 3 of season 5 of the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch docuseries. And then we're going to spend the balance of the episode talking about some of the very recent and I would say very significant developments within the UFO or UAP Twitter, UAP X, whatever the heck people want to call it. There's been some pretty significant developments that actually involve the owner of Skinwalker Ranch, and of course, that is Mr. Brandon Fugal. And we are really excited to get to you talking about that particular recent development with all of you folks, and looking forward to getting that going. But to start things off, Raj, let's talk about this most recent episode of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch that aired this past week, episode number 3, and it is called Dead in the Water. And of course, being a Raiders fan, I am all too familiar with that phrase, dead in the water. Uh, we
And you'll
won't go
probably
into
be
detail about that. But heck, even if if you drive, like, let's say if you ever drove a Ford Pinto or a Ford Escort or a AMC Gremlin, or uh, pretty much anything from the 70s and 1980s, you know what dead in the water means if you've ever owned one of those classic cars, right? But anyway, folks, the episode was called Dead in the Water, and there were some truly um, jaw dropping things that happened during this episode. In fact, I was literally, Roger, on the edge of my seat the entire time watching this episode. And it's no secret that I'm obviously a big fan of the docu-series, and I've had a avid interest in all things pertaining to Skinwalker Ranch for a very long time. When I first learned about what Skinwalker Ranch was, clear back in the late 1990s, when the Deseret News or Salt Lake Tribune ran an article about the Sherman family, and then of course in 2006 when George Knapp and Colm Kelleher's Hunt for the Skinwalker book came out. So I've been closely following the saga, if you will, of Skinwalker Ranch for uh, close to at least 20 years by now. So um, I know a lot about all the mythologies and the lore and the things that are alleged to have happened throughout the years out there. Some of it's pretty difficult to believe, and some of it is downright terrifying. And then, of course, since we've had the docu-series airing on the History Channel, now going into its 5th season, we finally have data to fall back on and to kind of substantiate, falsify, and verify some of the hypotheses that have been made. And we're now, Roger, 3 episodes in, I think the biggest takeaway I have so far from this season of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch is that everything seems to be a lot more focused when it comes to the scientific aspect. And I think that's partially because of the fact that Omnitech are now maintaining a permanent presence there at the ranch. So Eric has some help in regards to the technological aspects of monitoring the ranch. And also, I just think that the way that they've been building and gathering their case, if you will, their data to prove that something truly extraordinary is happening out there, still unexplained, but very real nonetheless. What's your thought on that? Does the season seem to be a little more focused in that regard than maybe we've seen in other seasons leading up to season 5?
Yeah, absolutely, it is. When you look at seasons 1 through 4, and I think as I look back on it, right, season 1, you've had a lot of the mystery, the lore, everything that way. And so there's a wide variety of scientific experiments that they could do. And you saw that in season 1. Then based on the data that they had from there, season 2, they focused a little bit more of their experiences in kind of like pushing into the mesa, trying to figure more about the triangle, Homestead 2, where are these things coming from? And I feel like based on especially a lot of what they nailed down and had data and with their hypothesis and just the things that they've happened in season 4, I think going into season 5, they've been very methodical about this is what we want to look at. We want to see what is really going on with the mesa. That we know from the data that they know that there is likely something underneath the ranch there that has been proven with multiple different companies and the data that they have. They also know that there is something in the sky over the triangle, and especially with Omnitech there and the things that have happened. Yes, I think it's very focused, and I think we're going to continue to see them do experiments to further that progress, right? Um, which makes me excited in the fact that I think we're starting to put more pieces together. We're starting to move towards, you know, more conclusions, more of the data that says, I think we're going down this the right way. And again, none of them are ever going to say, or I'm going to say it's absolutely 100% this until that is actually something that they can scientifically prove. But they do have enough data now that they are focusing on very certain parts of the ranch and really getting the latest technology there to kind of help prove out what they think is going on.
Completely agree. I could not have said it better myself. They're definitely methodical. That was a great term that you used, methodical in their approach, and it seems to be yielding some noteworthy results. And we're going to dive into what some of those results are right now as we begin to analyze and recap this episode, which again is called "Dead in the Winter." And as I put on my 4 eyes to read my notes here, um, we should also preface this, Roger, by saying that we're supposed to be getting some kind of massive magnetic storm, right, from the sun. In fact, here in Utah, they're already telling us that tonight we may actually get to see the northern lights because of the
Yes.
intensity of this magnetic storm. So, if Roger or I get knocked off of this while we're recording, that's probably why.
Yes, yes, I'm excited. I don't think, well, I can't remember a time where there's been such an anomaly like that coming off the sun that we would be able to see the aurora borealis this far south in North America. So I'm just hoping for clear skies. If you are not living in Utah and not following any of our posts, we've had crazy weather from it's been really warm and nice to all of a sudden we have snow falling in the mountains and the valleys, and then just tons and tons of rain, lightning storms. So we've had it all. It's crazy, crazy month. So I'm hoping for clear skies to see some of that.
Exactly. Last Saturday, it was 75 degrees and sunny. The very next day on Sunday, it was 34 degrees and snowing. And we got like almost an inch and a half of snow right on my front lawn. And I live down here in the Salt Lake Valley. So crazy stuff, and then we had a couple of days where it doesn't get any warmer than 40, and it's like, that weather is usually gone and over with by this time of the year in Utah. So yeah, crazy weather, just all kinds of weird stuff.
I think somebody pissed off Storm in the X-Men, and she is just having some crazy times.
I think you might be onto something there, Raj. I
Yeah,
think you
that
might be
we
onto something.
we'll get back to you once we know more about the X-Men.
Especially after I see Deadpool 3 with Wolverine.
I can't wait.
Cannot
Not
wait
not
for that.
not to divert off there, but yeah, Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman. Yeah, it'll be good.
That's going to be huge. Alrighty, folks. Episode 3, called once again the Dead in the Water. So the episode begins with Jim Royston and Sam DeRiso of Omnitech. They radio Eric in the command center to notify him of some strange LiDAR readings that they encountered over the triangle. And due to the UAP sightings from the previous week, Travis Taylor and Eric asked Sam and Jim to use their LiDAR drone to fly over the triangle area to see if it could reveal what might have caused the UAPs to appear in the sky last week. So Jim then tells Travis and Eric via radio that the LiDAR data that he and Sam had just recorded may have confirmed what they saw at the triangle last year. And regarding the missing data and the suggestion that it might represent, as crazy as it sounds, folks, a wormhole of some kind. So they send the data to Travis and Eric in the command center and head over to discuss and review the data in person at the command center with both Travis and Eric. So when they get to the command center, Eric opens the first file, and this file shows what appears to be a perfectly circular form of LiDAR data with two distinctly colored rings. And the top ring is green in color, and the bottom ring is like this really deep shade of blue. And the actual recording mechanism that was on board the LiDAR drone wasn't functioning properly. So Jim Royston had Sam DeRiso record the drone screen data with his cell phone. So what we're actually seeing, Roger, is that data, filmed by Sam's cell phone, because the drone's recording mechanism wasn't working properly. So uh, Travis then refers to it this bicolored ring as a donut. But to me, Roger, it looked like the two ends of a funnel coming together, much like we see in a typical 3D model rendering of what they say a traversable wormhole might look like. You've got a funnel where it's nice and wide on top, and then it narrows down, and like this little stick thing that comes out at the end. And if you were to join the bottom of the two funnels together, that's kind of what this donut shape that Travis described, kind of what it looks like. And so Eric, rather stunned, says, as he's looking at this data, he's like, okay, so what the hell is generating these returns? Close quote. And Jim says how amazed he is that the lines of data are so clear. Like the clarity of the LiDAR data is really, quite clear. You can make out that it's in a particular circular pattern and whatnot. And so Travis says that it looks similar to the previous year's data, and Sam then says that it was captured in the exact same location. And Eric remarks and says, quote, "That is just tantalizing, guys." So Roger, as we watch that particular part unfold in front of us, what they're referring to about last year is, if you'll remember, in one of the later episodes of season 4, is when Omnitech comes in and that LiDAR data that they capture shows this massive black area over by the triangle that back then Travis said, well, that's, is that a black hole? I mean, there's absolutely no data there. And it was, it had that circular shape to it. And so the data that Jim and Sam captured this time is actually seems to be a much clearer picture of that, if not a more high definition snapshot, for want of a better term, of this data. And really interesting is that Travis actually then says a few moments later that this new data set looks like, two ends of a funnel connecting together, which again is what they say the 3D model rendering of a Lorentzian traversable wormhole looks like. What are your thoughts on that, Roger?
Yeah, it was really interesting. The one of the first things that I noticed that they called out is just the symmetry, right? The the circular nature of it was like again, it was perfect circles, right? And you saw the top half, you saw the bottom half. It captured that. It does match up with what we saw last year, where it looked like the LiDAR data that they captured right there's something there in a ring, like a perfect ring formation, and then in the middle they couldn't capture anything, right? The LiDAR data was missing. And so they speculated that, hey, maybe it's, this is the shadow of the wormhole. So it's really exciting. It leads me to a lot of questions like if, for example, you do have a stable wormhole there, how is it, how do you traverse that, right? They're getting the returns, the LiDAR is sending back the data that they're seeing it, but how is that activated? How is that, how did they not see anything right there with their own eyes, their naked eyes, and yet, some of our technology, and again, I think that whatever is there is because we've seen where things just don't work and things like that. And we talked about this in one of our previous episodes that whatever sentience, intelligence is there, it's almost like you get that knowledge, and once they have done those things, their scientific stuff, they step up that knowledge. So it increases a little bit, a little bit. So I think that right as they start forming these hypotheses and we start getting more data, whatever's there, right? It's pretty amazing that because what I've noticed in the last couple seasons, even though the GPS is off and I have a lot of ideas around that. Again, I don't have a PhD, I'm not a scientist, but obviously something there is knocking the GPS data out. But you do have where in the past, a lot of the drone equipment wouldn't even work, wouldn't even go, would do some funky stuff, right, with different people that they brought in. Last few seasons, these even more high-tech drones are now working in the fact that they're giving us substantial data coming back that seems to match up with a lot of the theoretical theories, right, of, quantum physics and the different things that Travis has talked about. So I think it's exciting for me that, again, they are getting these readings back to say, man, some of our theories, yeah, while we can't yet prove it because we can't make this thing appear in like in Stargate and send something through and see a picture on the other side and bring it back, it does appear that quite likely there is something there, and it does match up with a lot of the theoretical data.
I agree. It's interesting because some of the computer models that have been done. In fact, remember there was a news article that came out last year. One of the universities out west, I want to say Stanford, but I'm not sure if it was Stanford that did it, but that they used a quantum computer to basically figure out how whether or not a wormhole was in fact possible. Was it a real thing? And the results yielded that yes, wormholes can be created, but that the finding, if I'm not mistaken, was that it took a great deal of negative energy to
Yep,
cause
dark
a
matter.
wormhole, to cause that fold in time and space, as it were. So yeah, it raises a lot of questions. If in fact we are looking at something that uh, conventional science, if that's the proper term to use here, would describe a wormhole as being, how is it happening? Why is it happening? And of all places, why is it happening at Skinwalker Ranch out in the middle of relatively remote northeastern Utah? And again, that just adds more questions that we honestly we don't know the answers to. And I'm sure that those are the same questions that Eric and Travis and the team out there have as well. But like you said, Roger, they keep trying to lay the foundation of what it might be. And so far, the data that they're getting back points us in that direction, that this does in fact appear to be something that might be along the lines of what we would term a wormhole. Again, how and why is anybody's guess. But again, it speaks to the importance that you and I are always making whenever we do these episodes about Skinwalker Ranch, which is they are following where the data leads them, right? And that's kind of the direction
Right.
that it's been leading. So where it goes from there, excuse me, in a bid to get out there while the anomaly is still active, Eric, Travis, Jim, and Sam head back out to the Triangle and meet up with Caleb and Dragon. And the team intends to launch multiple rockets equipped with GPS straight up into the Triangle to see if it yields any strange GPS data. We're then introduced to a brand new observation post on the ranch southeast of the Triangle and area. And uh, Roger, this observation post has been perhaps rather appropriately dubbed the Black Box, which I thought was kind of cool. And
Yeah.
so, from this new observation post called the Black Box, Eric will be observing the data that comes in from the rocket launches. And then Tom Lewis and Candace Lindy will be recording the launches via high speed camera. So the first rocket goes straight up through the triangle, but the odd thing is that even though they watched the rocket go straight up, the GPS data says otherwise. The GPS data indicates that instead of shooting straight up to an altitude of roughly 2,000 feet, the rocket only went 150 feet up and performed a northeasterly maneuver towards the mesa, which coincidentally happens to be the spot where they witnessed a UAP exiting the mesa last year.
Yep.
Well, undeterred, they decide to shoot off another rocket, which, like the first rocket, they all visually witness go straight up in the air, and again to a height of roughly 2,000 feet. And once again, the GPS data on board that rocket says that the rocket only got up as high as the top of the mesa and then turned west of the triangle. So it kind of went the exact opposite direction as the first rocket. So again, folks, that is not at all what the team on the ground witnessed these two rockets doing with their own eyes. They all witnessed the rockets going straight up and then obviously back down. So they decide to launch a third rocket. And once again, the rocket is seen by the team to visually shoot upwards to roughly 2,000 feet. Yet, once again, the GPS data on the rocket says it barely got as high as the top of the mesa and then made an abrupt turn to the west. We then cut to the next day to a shot. Well, actually, but before we get to this part, Roger, that's kind of where they kind of cut away then to go talk about the Hutchings Institute. But before we move on to that, what stands out to you about the fact that everybody on the ground and the camera crew witnessed all three of those rockets go straight up in the air, and but yet the GPS data is telling them that the rockets barely got up to the altitude of about where the top of the mesa is, just about 150, 200 feet or so, and then one
Just started
rocket
making
one rocket went toward the east and the other two went toward the west. I mean,
right. And they're making, because those rockets are built like rockets, right? They have one propulsion and that's up. And then, right, however, the GPS data shows they go up, stop, and then they're like doing the circular motion around to where, they're taking off to, which is just strange. Again, I'm not a scientist, but I I would theorize with the amount of anomalies, especially magnetic in the area, and the fact that over certain spots, especially their GPS data has shown in the past that it's either underground or it's at different levels where we visually see that no, from what we can see, it went straight up, right? So I do think that, for example, I'll just throw this out there as, a theory, can't prove or disprove, but if there is some type of gravitational anomaly there, it's got to have some type of effect on, technology and instruments and things like that. And if there is some type of underground base or something where there's, let's just say, more advanced technology than we are capable of as humankind that's down there, we have no idea how that would affect our instruments and things like that. All I do know is that something did affect it. We saw with our own eyes, it went straight up. The GPS data shows something different. What we have to do is we have to get to the middle ground there and say, what is causing what we see with our eyes and then what we see with our technology? How does that map up and how does that explain it? So there's something on the ranch, whether it's up in the sky, whether it's down below, that is causing these anomalies. And I think it's just further, even though it's no data and it's confusing data, it's further data that something is there messing with the technology.
Right. Well said. So from there, Roger, the focus shifts to you folks will recall in the last episode they had a biologist by the name of Ben Woodruff that came out to the ranch to inspect uh, two bird carcasses of two birds that had died on the ranch, as well as the remains of a cow that had previously died on the ranch. And so what happens is that we then cut to the next day where they're at the Hutchings Institute Museum in Lehi, Utah. And Roger, that's not very far from where you live, actually. This
Yep.
Hutchings Institute Museum. In fact, Roger, I think you and I need to go there on a trip and just go. I mean, it's not even a half hour away from where I live. Well, okay, about a half hour maybe. We got to go down there sometime. Truly,
Yeah, we should definitely do it. And we can do a Facebook Live and kind of tour the area. And yeah, I think it'd be fun.
yeah.
Do it.
So Eric and Candace, Tom Lewis, and Dragon meet with biologist Ben Woodruff at the Hutchings Institute Museum to follow up on the test results of the bone fragments from the dead cow and the bodies of the deceased birds. And Roger, this is where the episode went into territory that I just simply was not expecting. I mean, I guess at this point, 5 seasons in, anything that happens on the ranch really shouldn't surprise me, you know. But still, I was not prepared for some of the stuff that we saw unfold. And so, what happens, folks, is that Ben asks Eric to smell one of the bird specimens. And I don't know about the rest of you folks, but when somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, Jim, smell this," I mean, how many famous last words
Yeah,
where
exactly.
that
Exactly.
was that phrase uttered? Here, pull my finger. Here, smell this. It's like, no thanks, I'll pass. But so what Ben was doing is that Ben was giving Eric a part of one of the bird carcasses for Eric to smell, and so you can kind of see Eric rather reluctantly being like, okay. So he goes ahead and Eric smells the specimen, and Eric says he doesn't smell anything. And then re-emphasizes that the specimen should either be rotten to the core or mummified. And of course, Roger, it's neither.
Right.
And Ben then shows them a microscope sample of the flesh of one of the birds, and it still looks fresh. In other words, no sign of decay or decomposition. And what really got me, Roger, was that under the microscope, that muscle was still flexible.
Yeah. Which according to our understanding of not only human biology, but animal biology that has, we all, when we die, right? Body breaks down, corpses, things like that, they rot out and it smells terrible. And yet that neither is it mummified and it hasn't broken down, right? It's like I won't go as far to say it's living tissue, but it's in a state of suspended animation somehow, and like that should not be possible. Like that's something you would see in a science fiction movie or a fantasy movie. So
Exactly. It's not supposed to be possible. And yet it's right there. And we can see that, this specimen there, he's poking it and prodding it with his metal instrument under the microscope. And it looks like you're looking at a fresh cut of muscle, a fresh cut of meat of some kind. I mean, it is still, bright red, and it's completely responsive to, to the touch. It's still squishy, oof, you know. So Ben says that again, that's not supposed to be possible. He says that microbacteria should be eating it. It should not be soft, and it should be discolored. In other words, it should be decomposing. So Ben then poses this question, Roger. He says, what on the ranch could be preventing bacteria from consuming, right?
yeah,
So Ben then tells us that when an animal dies, the muscles tighten, they dry out, and rigor mortis sets in. But in this case, that has categorically not been happening. And again, folks, you can't overlook the significance of that. He then Ben says that when he got the specimens home, when he brought them home from the ranch, the bodies didn't begin to decay. But ironically enough, Roger, the head of the starling did, and it decomposed rapidly, but only the head. And that was really odd. Now, folks, if you remember, the starling is the one that was missing the entire top part of its head, and its brain was completely gone. So, whatever at the ranch was preventing decomposition of the birds while they were on the ranch was no longer preventing the decay once the specimens were taken to Lehigh. And interesting to note is that the decomposition was only taking place on the head of that one bird. So, again, explain to us how, once they bring the bird off the property and get it down to Lehigh, Utah, which is what, Roger, a good 2.5 hours away from Skinwalker Ranch.
yep,
Um, Completely different elevation. It's down in the valley like we are. So this starling starts decaying, but only the head. And we see what the head looks like. And sure enough, it looks like what you'd expect, the head of a dead bird to be decomposing to. But yet the rest of the body, Roger, as evidenced by the fact that we just saw a specimen, a slice of it underneath the microscope, was not decomposing at all, seemingly. And again, that's something that makes no sense, right?
right. Yeah, that's crazy.
So the grosbeak, which was the other bird, upon closer examination, Ben mentions that it appears to have been completely crushed by something. And he actually described it as though if the bird were flying along and then something just completely enveloped the bird and just, and he made the sound effects too. And so it was almost like something, completely crushed the body of the grosbeak. And that's because every bone in the body had been broken. Now, as if something was holding it and just, again, squeezed or compressed it. Ben mentioned there was no sign of predation that would have caused the bones to break in the manner that they did, or to the extent that the bones broke, and they appear to have not been inflicted post-mortem. In other words, this appears to have happened while the bird was alive. So talk about a horrible way to die. And
Y-
so Eric then asks the question, is it possible that an unseen, unknown physical force or object on the ranch is capable of inflicting this kind of injury on the birds? And so, Roger, let me put that question to you. Do you think, based off of what we've seen and some of the stories that we've heard in the past, that there could be an unseen force or an unseen object on the ranch that has the capability of inflicting that kind of a damage on a living creature, be it a bird or a dog? Because remember, again, going back to the Hunt for the Skinwalker book, the account of Terry Sherman's dogs being, you know, crushed and, or uh, I guess there's conflicting stories as to whether they were crushed and pounded into the ground or whether they were vaporized. But
Right.
again, something appears to have maliciously or with some kind of aggression killed living creatures on the ranch for whatever reason. So what are your thoughts? Do your when you heard uh, Ben describe how that grosbeak was killed, how it was literally crushed from all angles, seemingly, and then Eric saying, "Gosh, is there some kind of unseen force or object on the ranch that's capable of doing that?" What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that the likelihood, I mean, I would say yes. Definitely there's something on the ranch, and a couple of thoughts that, come into my mind. Other people have experienced, we know, again, just from like the Bob Bigelow era, where people like when they're walking in a certain area, like Homestead 2, they experience this sense of fear or dread, right? And it really forces them to turn back because it gets to the point where they just can't handle it anymore. Is there something? Is there, again, and I go back to, if we truly have a wormhole there, right? And it's obviously, if whoever, whatever is there, knows how to do that, and it's a stable one there, they know how to generate gravity, right? So whether it's from that or another gravitational anomaly, or there's just a physical presence or force that can do that, something there actually has the ability that they can remain unseen, and they can do that to a bird. If they can do that to a bird, they can literally do it to any living object there. So I, again, I can neither prove or disprove, but I do have a feeling that a lot of the the sense of dread or fear or things like that, it could just be something saying like, I don't know, where something's kicked into high gear, right? Maybe the wormhole's powering up, something like that. Who knows, right? And so it's meant to drive people away while whatever happens. And so again, I can't say definitively that's what it is, but it sure makes you wonder, if something can come along and just immediately crush every bone in your body like that and kill something instantly. It reminds me of like if you got trapped in, you know, some type of gravitational anomaly, you'd be toast. It would just immediately just crush you. So again, that's kind of my thinking and where I, want to learn more about and see if that goes down. But it is frightening nonetheless that you could just be walking along and next thing you know, you're just, and again, the bird, not in rigor mortis. It's not like something changed its internal biology to prevent that. And again, I don't know. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
I can't say how quantum physics would affect that, but is it theoretically possible that it would alter somehow? Sure.
The only thing that comes to my mind, Roger, and again, I am not at all an astrophysicist. I mean, quite obviously, anybody that listens to me talk knows that I'm not too sharp. But my limited understanding of physics is that with a black hole, they're called black holes because the gravity field around them is so intense that not even light can escape it.
Exactly.
So while we don't believe that what is there on Skinwalker Ranch is a black hole per se, because if it was, we'd all be dead, right? I mean, it would have just crushed, would have pulled the entire
Earth
Skinwalker
basically.
Ranch and literally
Yeah.
the rest of the earth. I mean, even if it was only the size of conceivably something as small as a baseball, if it was a black hole that small, it would still be enough to destroy the planet in very short time. So we don't think that it's necessarily a black hole, but is if this is in fact a wormhole that bends space and time, is it therefore possible that there is some kind of gravitational byproduct, for want of a better word, that happens in the vicinity? Uh, I don't know if the right term is the event horizon of a wormhole, like they use with a black hole, but still, is it possible that there is some kind of gravitic anomaly, some kind of transient gravitational anomaly that causes things like this to happen that would result, in some poor hapless bird just happens to be going about his day and then just flies into this thing. Only quite obviously it wasn't something that it flew into, or else it would have just been a case of a snapped neck and maybe, you know, broken wings. But this is an instance where it was like something enveloped the whole bird and just compressed it
Just
and just
squished it.
broke
Yeah.
every bone in its body. Um, so yeah, it's again, it's one of those things. It's the realm of science fiction and comic books, but yet we're seeing a lot of evidence, a lot of hard physical data and evidence that kind of points us in the direction of those fantastic, seemingly outlandish possible scenarios. So from there, Roger, as if we haven't gone far enough down the rabbit hole yet, right? Ben then starts talking to Eric and Candace and Tom and Dragon about the cow. And so he reiterates that they still don't know how the cow died. And the most curious thing about this whole cow remains is that perforation through the rib bone. Now, Roger, we addressed this in our last recap of episode 2, where there's a lot of people that are thinking that, well, this is just simply it was caused by a firearm. And while we can't go into detail, what we can tell you is that that option has pretty well been ruled out.
Yes.
The cow was not shot. That's not how the cow died. Because if it had been shot, think of how much blood is in your average cow. And to kill a cow that size, even with a gut shot where its rib bones would have been, if that's what killed the cow, it would have had to have been a really large firearm. So the other thing is that a large caliber firearm likely would have just simply shattered the rib instead of just completely perforated it. And there would have been all kinds of blood because it would have been a belly wound, right? And there
Yeah.
was no blood. So they're fairly certain that this animal was not shot. At least that's not how it died. And they're also really certain that this cow was not shot post mortem either. And if you pay really close attention to what Ben says in the episode, it should tell you that this perforation of the bone was in fact inflicted by some kind of predator animal. So Ben tells us how he performed an experiment where he took teeth from both a coyote and a bear, two very prominent predator animals that are known to exist all throughout Utah, including out by the ranch. And he placed these teeth in a drill press and gently pushed them down on rib bone to see if they would create or even come close to creating that kind of a perforation as we see on the one rib bone. And the results should come as no surprise is that in each instance, the coyote teeth and the teeth from the bear shattered when he tried doing that. So presumably indicating that the perforation could not have been caused by a coyote or a bear. And I think it's fairly safe to assume that the other large predator animal in Utah, which would be a mountain lion or a cougar, uh, very likely was also not the culprit here in causing that perforation in the rib bone of the cow. And
Right.
Roger, this is where the show completely where I mean my I literally jumped up off the couch and was like, no effing way. Right? I mean, because what happens then is Ben then pulls out the fossilized skull of a dire wolf and proceeds to show that the perforation in the rib bone is seemingly a close match to the canine tooth of the long extinct dire wolf. Now, folks, the dire wolf went extinct, what, Roger? Maybe
10,000
10,000,
years.
thirteen
Yeah.
thousand years ago. I mean, a long, long time ago. Back in the days when my dad was still a teenager, right? That's what my dad would
My
always say.
dad too. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And so as soon as Ben said that, folks, the look on Eric's face is one of complete and absolute astonishment. And the look on Dragon's face, Roger, the expression
Priceless.
on Dragon's face
Priceless.
was
His
even more so.
he was like, what the? Yeah. Well,
Exactly.
imagine, just imagine you're in charge of security and you have fossilized remains that now match up to a modern day a cow that was living really 8, 9 months ago, and or I guess prior to that, right? Because it was not last year, but I guess yeah, last year when they were filming. So, but knowing that that is a likely source of what happened to it, man, with all that news, if I were Dragon, my head would be swimming, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, we have something on the ranch that can just kill something with and just crush it immediately. Not only that, we have a domesticated animal, huge, a cow is huge. Something perforated that rib bone, dragged it, right? And it matches up with a 10,000 to 13,000 year old, extinct species, direwolf. Like, how do you protect? It's again, how do you protect against that? How do you protect against what you cannot see? So, yeah, Dragon's face, priceless.
Completely. I mean, we're used to seeing Dragon make some classic faces, but this one was the first time I've ever seen that kind of expression on Dragon's face. And again, the look of absolute astonishment on Eric's face said it all as well. And so then Ben explains how the size of what he calls the sagittal crest on the dire wolf, the musculature that's on the this part of the dire wolf's head gives it excessive force when it bites, and very possibly would be capable of inflicting that kind of perforation wound to the rib bone that we saw on the cow.
Right.
And Eric, again, being completely gobsmacked, says, quote, I have absolutely no framework in which to accommodate the presence of an extinct species on Skinwalker Ranch. How is this even possible? Close quote. Ben then says that he's not saying that there's a population of what should be extinct dire wolves running around Skinwalker Ranch. But at the same time, the data doesn't lie. The only known match for a predator animal that could perforate the rib bone of a cow without shattering either its own canine teeth or the rib bone itself is a direwolf, an animal that has been extinct for over 10,000 years. So after that, Dragon, looking again absolutely shocked, then recounts the story of Terry Sherman and his family encountering a dire wolf soon after they moved onto the property, and how Terry Sherman shot at this dire wolf who had reached into this calving pen and had this baby calf in the grip of its jaws. And so at first, Terry Sherman and his family were knocking the dire wolf with these big sticks, if I remember correctly. But the interesting thing, Roger, if you remember the beginning of that story of the encounter with the dire wolf, the Shermans, Terry Sherman noted how this dire wolf acted surprisingly tame and domesticated. Right? It actually kind of walked right up to him and let him pet it, and they. Terry Sherman describes being able to smell the wet dog, that had clearly been going through the wet grass, and said, gosh, this is an awfully big domesticated wolf because it's coming right up and letting them pet it, and then just without warning it, the wolf, this dire wolf, sticks its head in and tries taking a bite out of this baby calf. And so what happens then is that Terry Sherman unloads a 357 Magnum into this massive wolf. And folks, if you know nothing about firearms, know that a 357 Magnum is one of the most powerful handguns out there. Now, it's not as powerful as a 44 Magnum, it's not as powerful as a 454 Casull, but a 357 Magnum is a strong enough, it moves with enough velocity to penetrate an engine block. Okay, so this is you get shot with a 357, you're going down. It's a very powerful handgun. And from what we understand, Terry Sherman emptied 5 or 6 rounds at relatively point blank range into this dire wolf and had essentially no effect. It was unfazed by it.
Yeah,
So
it didn't phase it. This thing was not afraid of Terry Sherman or what the Sherman family was doing to it.
exactly. So he then has his son go into the house and bring out a 30-06 rifle. Now, a 30-06 rifle is a hunting rifle that they use to take down big game like elk, deer. It's a really powerful rifle. And so Terry Sherman then empties a round or two of this 30-06 rifle into the wolf, and visibly a chunk of flesh goes flying off this dire wolf, and the wolf then just it drops the calf out of its jaws and just kind of casually saunters away as though nothing happened. And so they follow the wolf, and the tracks of the wolf go right up to where the creek is on the property, and then they see the tracks going into the water, and then the tracks just disappear. There is no tracks whatsoever anywhere on the riverbank, within reasonable distance up or downstream. It just seemingly vanishes into thin air. So, and we'll get back to the chunk of flesh that was allegedly blown off the wolf, because there's some really funky properties about that too, if you remember the story, Roger. So this account of the Sherman's encounter with the dire wolf, scary as it is, correct me if I'm wrong, Roger, has always been considered more anecdotal because, of course, no actual proof or hard data other than their eyewitness testimony of the encounter actually exists.
Right,
And
that is correct.
that is why Travis Taylor and other people have said that the incidents that are reported in the Hunt for the Skinwalker book are basically just really interesting ghost stories because there's no data to actually back up. There's no video, there's no gathered data of any kind. So all that they are the testimony of, and I gotta say, from what I understand, I've never met Terry Sherman, but the people that have spoken about Terry Sherman's character say that he is a man of unimpeachable character, and this is not the kind of thing that he would just make up out of whole cloth to make a name for himself. And it should also be noted, folks, that Terry Sherman refuses to talk to anybody about this and refuses to even set foot on the ranch after all this time. So this
Mhm.
is clearly not a man that made this story up just for the hopes of getting famous, like that couple that did the Amityville horror uh, deal. It's nothing like that. So I tend to believe Terry Sherman, what he says happened. I have no reason to believe otherwise, especially now, Roger, that we have the details that seem to be pointing in the direction that, guess what? We don't know how, but there certainly seems to be some very legitimate evidence that points the direction that maybe there really is a large predator animal similar to, or at least exactly, is a dire wolf that went extinct 10,000
Yeah,
years ago. And getting back to the comment that I made just a moment ago about the properties that were observed about the chunk of flesh that was blown off the wolf, Terry Sherman and his son have indicated that that chunk of flesh that was blown off the wolf looked like it had been decaying for days, if not weeks. It smelled horribly and it was just decomposing. It wasn't like a fresh chunk of meat that had
right.
been blown off an animal. So, kind of the exact opposite. Here's this story of a dire wolf, an animal that's not supposed to be alive, coming out of the ranch, attacking one of their baby calves. They shoot it at least 5 or 6 times with one of the most powerful handguns you can have, and they then shoot it with at least 1 or 2 rounds of a 30-06 hunting rifle, which is more powerful than a 357, and end up blowing a chunk of meat or flesh off of this large animal. And the chunk of meat appears to be decaying. It seems to have already appeared as though it's been dead for a long time. The exact opposite of what we saw with these birds. And again, Roger, I don't know about you, but that just it makes my head spin.
Yeah, it seems like you have two extremes. Either time is slowed down to the point where it looks like decay isn't happening, right? Or time is extremely sped up, right? Where in the Sherman case, like it's already rotting and like that, both of those scenarios just shouldn't happen in what we understand as physics today and biology. So again, what's the real deal going on? Well, this is what the whole docuseries is about, right? To continue to theorize, put together experiments, and really look into what the possibilities could be. So, but yeah, I'm like you, mind blown on the fact that it really closely matches with a dire wolf, which is an extinct species of wolf, right? How do you have that? I mean, there's just you can't rationalize that. And yet the stories and now this, right, just is starting to match up. We've got some physical evidence here that there is something more to these stories that have been passed down and happened that people have eyewitness accounts. So
And that's kind of the story of Skinwalker Ranch in a nutshell, if you will, is that there's all these stories. I mean, and I don't know about you, Roger, but I mean, I've always held out the possibility that some of these things could actually have happened. Specifically, these reports going back years, if not generations, of objects flying into and out of the mesa, right? And we've watched the progression of the series of the docu series from season one, where Travis Taylor comes on the ranch being a total skeptic and like, I'm gonna figure this out. There's gonna be a perfectly rational and mundane explanation to all of this, and we're probably gonna find out that maybe there's some spoofing and some bad actors, some mischievous kind of type people that are out there trying to make this look like something it's really not. And we've seen the exact opposite happen, haven't we? We have seen gradually, bit by bit, an awful lot of those old legends like things flying into and out of the mesa. And now, this whole other layer of holy crap, we're seeing potentially proof. And I'm saying potentially because we don't know yet for a fact. So I'm not saying this
right.
is factual, folks. Get that through your heads. I'm not saying that it absolutely categorically is a dire wolf. I'm just simply saying that we have a credentialed professional uh, biologist who has gone through the scientific method, as Eric and Travis and the team have ever since day one, using that scientific method to either prove or disprove these theories, these legends, these myths, these ghost stories, if you will, And we're finally at the point, Roger, where some of these seem to have a little bit of, we should be granting a little more weight to some of these stories, because there appears to be some substance behind these well-known ghost stories and myths and legends at Skinwalker Ranch. And that, again, is one of those things where even I, being a longtime fan and having a long time interest in Skinwalker Ranch, even I can't believe how things are shaping up and where the investigation and where the data, and again, folks, I have to keep emphasizing the data, where the data is leading this investigation. And if you are foolish enough, as we know some people that have been watching our previous episodes have actually admitted, oh, I gave up watching the series, a year or two ago because it wasn't moving fast enough and it just looks like they're trying to, jerk us along here. I can appreciate people feeling that way because you know what? Scientific investigation, to do everything the right way, takes time. It takes patience. And so many people just don't want to have patience. They want the answer now. They want it yesterday. And that's just not the way the real world works. You know, you watch these TV shows like Law and Order, and you have the murder, the investigation, and the trial, and everything is done within
1 hour.
what a 47-minute episode.
47.
You're
Yeah.
lucky,
Yeah.
42, 47 minutes. The real world does not work like that, Roger, right? I mean,
Nope.
you have the incident, you then have the investigation, the gathering of evidence, the analyzation of the evidence and the data, then you have the trial. I mean, these things do not happen overnight. They don't happen sometimes over a several months span. It's just the point I'm making, folks, is that what is going on at Skinwalker Ranch is truly extraordinary and it's real. I don't know what any of it is, but whatever it is, I do know this much, it's real. And if some of you want to jump on the bandwagon of saying, "Oh, it's just, top secret technology," I accept, yes, that may be exactly what it is. Or those of you that want to jump on the alien and extraterrestrial bandwagon, knock yourself out. You're welcome to feel that. I can't do that. I can't say definitively, oh, it's this, or this, because I don't know. Because as we've seen, when we think that something is pointing in one direction, something else happens that says, not so fast. It may be this, or this, or this, or this that we had never even considered before. So,
Right.
because of that, people that dismiss the legitimacy or the quote unquote reality of the docu-series The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, I really don't think they actually are taking the time to watch the docu-series. They are just simply getting frustrated that it's not happening fast enough, that they're not getting answers fast enough. And I'm here to tell you, folks, nobody is more frustrated than the guys that are out there at Skinwalker Ranch trying to figure this shit out. I mean,
Yeah.
they just when they think they're making progress, that something else comes up, then that's just like go back to square one, and or here's this other thing we didn't consider, or here's something that we dismissed because it was so ridiculous and outlandish, but now the data is saying, again, not so fast, and we now have to bring this back into, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And that's just the nature of a scientific investigation, folks, is that you have to take time. And then once you feel that you've successfully verified or falsified your hypothesis, that's when you go and you have it peer reviewed. So you say, okay, here is what I did. Here are all the steps that we took, and here's all the data to back up the conclusion that we have made regarding this particular hypothesis. And you have other credentialed academics, physicists, scientists, archaeologists, anthropologists, you name it. You then have them review the data to get their feedback, get that peer reviewed. And then once that's done, then you publish. Then you go public with it and say, this was our finding. And again, folks, that doesn't happen even in the span of here we are now entering the sixth season that this investigation has been going on, are they closer to some of the answers? Yes, I think they are. Do they know a lot of things that they haven't told us yet? I'm sure they have, and I'm sure there's very valid reasons for that. The least of which would be the fact that they do have an NDA with the History Channel. It's a business
Yeah.
decision, folks, and if you can't accept that, then sorry, you don't live in reality. That's just the way it is. So, again, I get that people are frustrated. I get that people don't think that the investigation is going fast enough. And I get that people think that this is all a bunch of bullshit, sensationalized nonsense. And Roger, we're going to talk about that when we finish talking about this episode because it ties into what's been going on Twitter and X in the last 24 to 36 hours. So, apologies for the loquacious and verbose detour I just took us on there. But what happens then, Roger, is they then cut back to the ranch, and the team is in the command center reviewing the data from the rocket experiments that we talked about earlier. And they reiterate how the rockets, again, all shot straight up visually, but the GPS data shows each rocket went no higher than 150 feet and veered off to either the east or the west. And Travis then points out how the second and third rocket launches, and again, these were the ones that the GPS showed flying off to the west, had data points um, in an area where both Juniper Unmanned and Lunasonde showed underground voids or tunnels in the surveys
Yep.
that they've done previously.
And a huge magnetic anomaly.
Correct. So if you remember, folks, clear back in season 1 or season 2, I think, Roger, a magnetometer survey was done by Juniper Unmanned, and then Lunasonde conducted their radar scan in 2022, which would have been last season in season 4.
Yep.
Both of those companies, Roger, identified a possible underground tunnel between the triangle and the mesa. And again, like you said, a significant magnetic anomaly. Now, the second and third rocket launches diverted from their flight path, and the GPS data terminates at that alleged underground tunnel region west of the triangle. And again, that's what the GPS data showed visually as the team on the ground were watching. Those rockets never veered left or right, didn't go east or west, they just went straight up and down. So Eric then shows what the high-speed camera captured during the rocket launches. And remember, Tom Lewis and Candace Lindy were manning the high-speed camera while they were launching the rockets. And we see a truly odd-looking, elongated, fast-moving object. And Roger, I don't even know where to begin to describe this thing. It looks unlike anything we've ever seen on the show or any other UAP or UFO video that I've ever seen. And so there appears to be what Eric describes as lobes or possibly, I don't know, fins of some kind, protrusions of some kind on either side of this elongated cylindrical, really fast moving UAP. So again, Roger, what did that thing look to you? Now there's going to be some naysayers. They're going to say, "Oh, that was just another case of an insect," and you can tell those things are those flaps. You know, they're wings of an insect or something of that nature. What did this thing look like to you? Did it look like something truly anomalous, or did it look like something perhaps more mundane, like some kind of insect flying into the camera range?
Right. I can't rule out that it could be some mundane explanation, but what struck me as odd is that the color of it appeared to be um I would say kind of a dull metallic. And as they progressed the frames, the what Eric categorized as fins, those points moved around the object, right? So at one point it was on top, one point it was down towards the middle, on the bottom, and it almost looked like these things were rotating around. And I'm wondering if it's not something like akin to, like if this thing is moving so incredibly fast that we can't see it, whatever these things are, so it looks anomalous to me. And I'll just throw it out there. I mean, we've seen, the Tic Tacs, the gimbal videos, right? And these things are pulling maneuvers that we can't do with our modern day aircraft, that at least that we know about. And I'm wondering if whatever that captured in the high speed camera, these things, these white things that are moving around, are not generating some type of gravitational field or something that, you know, allows it to move particularly really, really fast, so that with the unaided eye, naked eye, you can't see it. I don't know if that's true or not, but it did look very anomalous to me. And I would say, good 98, 99% that they caught something truly that is otherworldly.
Yeah. I like you, Roger, I don't know where to begin to say what this might be other than the fact that it looks anomalous as hell to me. Um,
Right.
Again, we've seen this footage that was released by Jeremy Corbell back in March, I think it was, of that they called it the jellyfish UFO.
Hmm.
To me, it looked like the Imperial probe droid from Empire Strikes Back, but
Right. From,
that
yeah, on the planet
that's
Hoth there kind
yeah,
of thing.
like something on the planet Hoth, but that's just the Star Wars fanboy in me. But again, we've seen video evidence of UAPs or seemingly nuts and bolts UFOs, meaning that they are actual physical, tangible objects that don't fit that traditional flying saucer um, description of what we've heard of for so many years. And yes, the gimbal video is clearly looks more like the traditional flying saucer, but the Tic Tac doesn't look like the traditional saucer shaped thing. And the jellyfish video that Jeremy Corbell released a couple months ago, that doesn't look like a flying saucer. So I think quite obviously, if we accept the fact that there are indeed anomalous aircraft out there that we don't know what they are, we don't know what their origin is, we don't know what their capabilities are. Um, Quite obviously, they don't all look alike. So the
Yeah.
fact that this thing is kind of in that same vein of something unexpected, like what this jellyfish UAP looked like a couple months ago, then again, what is this? Where does it come from? Who knows? And yes, like you said, Roger, you have to hold out at least a little possibility that it does have a mundane irrational explanation. Maybe it is a flying insect of some kind, but the fact that it's moving as fast as it is, that it's picked up from a long distance, it just didn't seem to be similar to that one incident where they initially misidentified a bird or an insect on what was his name, Burdette,
Yeah, Jim Burnett.
that they initially thought might have been a UAP, and then they actually, Travis Taylor, to his credit, came forward and said, you know what, we got that one wrong, and it actually was either a bird or an insect. So they do. I mean, that's just the nature of science, folks. You get things wrong sometimes, and the fact that Travis Taylor actually owned up to that tells you everything you need to know about whether or not this guy is legitimate and can be believed. Um, we've seen a lot of other instances, Roger. We won't name any shows of instances where they've been caught, making a claim that is clearly cannot be substantiated, that is, in fact, the exact opposite of what they're claiming, and they just go silent.
You, yeah, you can prove that what they've claimed is not what they've claimed it to be
You
with
can
hard evidence.
you
So
can prove it
it's unfortunate.
conclusively. Yeah. So yeah, so the team then decides that Jan Franke, remember him from last season with his GPR, needs to come back out to the ranch and do another survey in that area where both Lunasond and Juniper detected underground anomalies or possibly underground structures. And for
Yeah.
me, I don't know about you, Roger, but that was kind of like, yes. I mean, I thought that Jan was a great example of somebody that like Travis, when he came on the ranch, he was like, "Yeah, this will be fun." And then, you know,
Right.
as remember Thomas saying in the very first episode, the ranch responds when somebody new comes on the ranch. And I think it's safe to say the ranch definitely responded to Jan last season. So I'm excited that they are going to be bringing Jan back to Skinwalker Ranch, and I think presumably that's going to happen in the next episode, episode 4. So the next day, Travis, Caleb, Thomas, and Dragon go out to Dry Gulch Creek, which is on the south end of the property, and they go out there with a kayak to walk the creek and search for potential anomalies to see if maybe there may be anything to back up the information regarding the hypothesis regarding the dire wolf. So the interesting thing, Roger, is that once the team sets foot into the creek, what happens to the GPS data?
It stopped responding. It shows it, yeah, it showed them way underground. It was weird.
The GPS return that Eric was observing in real time showed that the team that was now in the river or the creek were 5,000 feet underground.
And that's amazing that they can be in two places at once. Yeah,
Right?
again, something there is pulling those GPS signals in a direction that doesn't make sense to us, but I feel one day they'll get an answer that will be like, ah, this is what's going on, and this is why and because yeah, I mean, our conventional technology, it should work. I mean, outside of the ranch, GPS works fine.
Mhm.
They use it to, keep aircraft safe. And, when you're doing, you're out hunting, you're out in the wilds, whatever, right? You've got GPS data to keep you located anywhere you're at on Earth, right? And can help you navigate things. And the fact that there's just so many anomalies with GPS just on that 512-acre ranch is insane. It's crazy.
It really is. And so the other interesting thing, Roger, is that while they're in the water, remember they have the tri-field meter, and the tri-field meter is consistently reading zeros, which apparently never happens on a tri-field meter. And then Dragon observes that the battery on the tri-field meter, which was completely brand new when they headed
It
out
was
to
drained.
the creek, had drained. How many times have we seen that happen on the ranch, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
Travis then mentions that there's also he's got one of those I guess dosimeters, and that that showed no gamma ray readings either. So it was kind of like the moment they got in the water, it just shut down all electromagnetic detection equipment that
Well,
they had with them, which I think
usually
was
with a tri-field meter, you always typically have some transient background. I mean, I can't
exactly.
say that with 100% certainty, but at least the situations that I've seen across my life, no matter where you go, you're going to get some type of, that's where you can actually form that foundation or baseline of this is what's in the area, right? And then you take that baseline, and then what you get, you base it off of that baseline. But when they step in there, not only does the GPS show that they're, underground, but there's there's not even a transient signal. It's like they just got cut off there in a different dimension. Not that they were, but I mean, I can't explain that. It's just very odd. And if it's gonna do that, it's gonna happen on Skinwalker Ranch.
Absolutely. I mean, you just nailed it on the head right there. So then something truly kind of creepy and bizarre happens as they're walking, and just to set the picture for you folks, you've got Travis, Dragon, Caleb, and Thomas are all kind of walking side by side, doing like this, almost like they're doing a grid search as they're walking down this dry gulch creek, and they walk about it's roughly about a mile distance or so from the point where they entered the creek that they're walking down, and they happen upon this beaver dam. And shortly after they cross over the beaver dam, they find the remains of, well, actually, before they get there, before they get to the beaver dam, they actually find a tree that appears to be charred, right? And
Yeah, which is
it
really strange.
it's relatively close in proximity to where, if you'll remember, the fence post from last year also had this really bizarre charring on it, and so this tree stump had something very similar. So Dragon goes over and uses his machete and chops off a couple of samples of this tree here, and gathers them to take to be analyzed. Shortly after they do that, Roger, is when they happen upon the decomposing remains of some kind of predator animal that is kind of floating in the water. It's caught in some of the brush and growth on the side of the river, but it's still in the water nonetheless. And you can tell the guys can smell it. They say it smells absolutely horrible. It's literally, it's actually it's like bubbling with maggots, I think is the way Thomas described it. So this thing is actually very much decomposing. And interestingly enough, is that this animal, whatever it is, has very large canine teeth. So Dragon says they can't obviously tell what kind of animal it is, but it appears to be a canine or a dog of some kind. So looks a lot bigger than a coyote. So I don't think it's a coyote. But again, in that area, they have a lot of feral dogs that come onto the property, or res dogs, as people in the area refer to them. Uh, or who knows? Maybe it is an actual wolf, dire wolf. Who knows? Uh, we just don't know. But either way, Travis then takes Dragon's machete and takes the jawbone from this decaying, badly decomposing animal, and puts it in a bag and sends it off to Ben Woodruff for further analyzation at the Hutchings Museum Institute Museum. So that essentially wraps up the episode, Roger. And again, just looking back, mind blown so many times during that episode, and um, I cannot believe how many truly anomalous things were touched upon in this episode, and how much evidence and data we got to see that was encountered along the way. I mean, what are your final thoughts on wrapping up this episode?
Yeah, I really think this was a an outstanding episode. There was a lot that was going on. And again, it's as much as like the data that they get back, it just, what I've seen out there on a lot of the different forums and people talking about that they wish that these episodes were 2 hours or even longer, right? Just
Yeah,
to get
yeah.
more information in because it goes so fast. But I think it leaves a lot of questions that are still unanswered. And I'm excited for this season. Truly, I think their focus, like we talked about at the beginning of this episode, is their focus is razor sharp. They're looking at places and things to really try and get more of that evidence. So I really, I think the one thing that I'm really excited about is coming back and hopefully next episode or the episode after to find out, is there something to that decaying animal? What it is, what it isn't, right? Because I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, because they've never really done investigations in the creek, and now I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if they don't have equipment and cameras on that the entire creek that runs across the ranch because of some of the findings. So I'm truly excited. I can't wait to find out what they get back. So
Yeah, and it's you mentioned something before we began recording tonight, Roger, about in regards to large predator animals. When we had Chris Bartell on a couple episodes back, and of course we love talking with Chris Bartell. He's such an amazing resource uh, for knowledge about Skinwalker Ranch. And he told us about how, and he's got photographs of these tremendously large paw prints, right? And then he told us about the encounter that he had with this humongous wolf, that just made this unreal guttural growl kind of a sound, almost like
Yep.
paralyzing with fear kind of thing. So if you kind of again, if you take a step back and you take into account what Chris Bartell has told us, and for me anyway, Chris Bartell is cut from the same cloth as Caleb is, which is to say he is a law enforcement officer by profession. His whole reputation rests on his reputation, right? His integrity. And I have never once had any reason to believe that Chris Bartell has made up any of the things that he's told us. He has the evidence to show a lot of the things that he's told us. And so it is with all of this. We're now starting to see that maybe all of this ties in together, and that maybe some of the things that we thought were the more extraordinary and difficult to believe aspects about the ranch in regards to stories of cryptids and extinct creatures like the dire wolf, the data is showing that maybe there really is something to all of these stories. And again, the wow factor of this episode was just through the roof. I mean, I enjoy watching every episode, but I can't immediately recall another episode of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch where afterward I was just completely at a loss for what to say, what to think. Um, I mean, the episode where the blob from last season, that was pretty significant. The only other thing that comes close, I think, for me that we've seen so far is when Caleb was shining that laser up through the triangle and it appeared to be,
Blocked and split.
split
Yeah.
and bent and blocked by something that wasn't there. Um, I think this actually exceeded my WTF response this last episode. It really, and again, those of you that gave up watching The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, I don't feel bad for you because you're the ones that chose to abandon watching this. And I think Roger, that what is eventually going to come out of the research going on at Skinwalker Ranch is going to be a lot more meaningful in the long run. And I think it's going to happen again at a greater pace than anything our own government is going to tell us. Uh,
Oh
I,
yeah.
I just I just think that again, that term disclosure, I hate to use that term because it gets used so much and it means different things to different people. But I think if there is any disclosure to happen, I think it's going to come from the private sector in places like Skinwalker Ranch a lot sooner than it will from Congress or really even any other whistleblower. Because even with whistleblowers, you still got to follow a process to follow up. I mean, here we are, we're almost 1 year away from the time that David Grush did that earth shattering interview with Ross Coulthart on News Nation. And yeah, we had an amazing congressional testimony or congressional hearing about it. But here we are a full year later, and not a whole lot has happened. Little bits and pieces have leaked out here and there, but
Right.
again, what that speaks to, folks, is the absolutely slower than molasses in January pace of government and legislation. Again, folks, this is the long game. This is not something that resolves itself in a 42-minute television episode. It's not something that's going to resolve itself over 5 seasons or potentially 10 seasons. We just don't know, right?
Right.
And again, it takes time. You have to have patience because this is the long game. And if you lose patience, fine. But don't go around saying, oh, it's all, that they're all just simply uh, drawing this out so they can get ratings. The people that say that clearly do not know anything about the team that is out there. And to be fair, Roger, I've never met Brandon Fugal, but what I do know about Brandon Fugal is that he's a man of his word. And he is a man that absolutely does everything he can to be transparent and above board. And
Yeah.
we're going to dive into that right now, Roger, because something happened just in the last 24 hours uh, on X or Twitter, whatever the heck you guys want to call it, that really I feel demonstrates not only the integrity, but the character and the honesty of Brandon Fugal regarding this whole Skinwalker Ranch stuff. What say you?
Yeah, let's jump into it. The last 24 hours have been very, very interesting. And there are a lot of, and I think again, there are a lot of people that make their living off of trying to dehumanize, make fun of, discredit people in this field, right? They go after them. They go after their integrity. They put, try to put cracks into these these things that they're telling us, right? We've all heard the phrase, extraordinary findings, need to have extraordinary evidence, and I think that we'll get there. But it is unfortunate that there are people that flat out lie or do things, and it's really interesting in the last 24 hours, especially that Brandon Fugal, um, actually, to a lot of these detractors on X, if you're following Brandon or any of the UAP UFO community, Brandon actually confirmed that a meeting did happen back in 2018 in Congress where the discussion was Skinwalker Ranch, and he put a whole PDF file together and of pictures of who was there, of the topics that they were talking about, and he confirmed it. And it's kind of turned the UFO and the UAP detractors, put them into a like, oh, what the hell just happened? We might have to walk back some of our stuff because we just realized that we hitched our wagons to the wrong people, and the people that we trusted just flat out lied to us. So yeah, it's crazy. What are your thoughts?
Well, for me, it all comes down to one person, and that person is Sean Kirkpatrick, or Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, right?
Yep.
Who, of course, was the former director of AARO. This was the man that was in charge of the Pentagon's official all domain anomaly resolution office. This was the guy that it was his job to do all the research and the investigating of claims that were made by people like David Grush, these extraordinary claims of there being a massive decades long cover up, 80, almost an 80-year-old, 80 year or more cover up of the fact that there's been a UFO crash retrieval and reverse engineering program completely off the books, Manhattan Project level secrecy about it. And Sean Kirkpatrick, of course, told Congress under oath that he has not seen anything that indicates that there's anything to see here, right? He then, after he gets, after he officially resigns and is no longer serving in the capacity of the director as the director of AARO, he publishes this AARO's historical UAP report, right? Which again was not surprisingly a great big nothing burger. Nothing to see here. I've seen no evidence whatsoever of any non human intelligence, no evidence of there being a secret crash retrieval program, no evidence of any of these outlandish claims being made by David Grush or anybody else. And if you'll remember, Kirkpatrick particularly threw Travis Taylor and Jay Stratton under the bus
Yep.
in that interview that he did in the Scientific American, or the op ed, I guess, that he published in the Scientific American. And so, one of the more prominent debunkers out there, and I still don't like to use his name, Roger, but everybody knows who I'm going to be talking about, This debunker has gone to great lengths, gone to great pains to paint all of Skinwalker Ranch as the biggest grift in the history of the UAP and UFO topic, right?
Yep.
He has accused Brandon Fugal of all kinds of ridiculous things, has said these really baseless and unnecessarily unkind and untrue things about Travis Taylor, about Jay Stratton, about Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, calling them grifters and all kinds of stuff. He's poked fun at the testimony of people that were on Skinwalker Ranch that saw some truly, you know, exotic things, I guess would be the best way to put it. And so this particular debunker, quite obviously not one of my favorite people because of his attitude, um, he's been now left in this situation where not very long ago he did an interview with Sean Kirkpatrick. And in that interview, this pseudo journalist, this debunker, who shall remain nameless, actually posed some very good questions to the former director of AARO, Dr. Kirkpatrick, and specifically said, have you met Brandon Fugal? Did you ever attend a meeting in the Capitol, a briefing about Skinwalker Ranch? And Sean Kirkpatrick categorically denied ever meeting Brandon Fugal, ever having attended a briefing at the Capitol or anywhere else in Washington, D.C. that was about Skinwalker Ranch. And this debunker likes, I mean, this is a guy that talks louder and more often than I do. So imagine that. I mean, this guy is more annoying than I am. I know that's reaching, but stay with me, folks. So this guy is now left with egg on his face because Brandon Fugal reached the point where he's like, you know what? I've had enough of this shit. It ends tonight. And so last night, Brandon Fugal shared on X or Twitter a series of photos that undeniably show Sean Kirkpatrick in attendance at this meeting that is alleged to have taken place in 2018, where Brandon Fugal is there, Eric Bard is there, Hal Putoff is there, Kit Green is there. And guess what? So is Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick.
Yeah, a couple people away from Brandon Fugal.
Yes. And Brandon Fugal in this one particular image is clearly leading the presentation. And Sean Kirkpatrick, instead of looking at Brandon Fugal, he's looking directly at the screen that Brandon is going through the slide presentation on. And so here's the thing, folks. Kirkpatrick has been caught in a lie, blatant lie, more times than this particular incident. Okay, and make no mistake about it, folks. And Roger, I'm not going to speak for you, but for me, I 100% applaud Brandon Fugal for saying enough is enough. This, everybody needs to see
There's,
this, and
yeah,
I
there's the proof.
100% am happy to see Brandon Fugal do exactly what he did and put these son of a bitches in their place because it had to happen. And sadly, when you're dealing with people that are so willfully ignorant about this topic to the extent that you have to wonder if they're on the take, if they're like a paid disinformation agent that's being paid by some shadow organization within the government to stir up all this shit, to marginalize, make fun of, and mock, and all this stuff. I mean, that's how over the top some of these guys are about all of this. And so we already know that Kirkpatrick lied because just last week, a Freedom of Information Act was released. I believe it was by John Greenwald of the Black Vault. I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me as being right on that. But it showed that it completely contradicts a statement that Dr. Kirkpatrick had made earlier about there not being any video of this alleged incident that happened at Eglin Air Force Base down in Florida. And so, quite obviously, we now know through this Freedom of Information Act document release, somebody wasn't doing their homework or somebody willfully lied about this, because this document released under the Freedom of Information Act request clearly shows there was a video shot of this incident at Eglin Air Force Base of this craft that was an acorn shaped craft, kind of similar to what the account was of the famous Kecksburg UFO incident in the 1960s. So Kirkpatrick knowingly lied about that,
Yeah.
presumably.
Yep.
So this is a man, and it's now appears that the allegations of people like myself and other people that have followed the evidence and the testimony of people that are in a position to know these kinds of things, that have said that AARO was just it was a front. It was a office that was put up because they had to, and its whole mission was to discredit the UFO and UAP movement. They wanted to put the kibosh to stop the momentum of disclosure. That's what AARO was there to do. That is why so many whistleblowers refused to testify in front of AARO, because Sean Kirkpatrick would have found a way to get people to violate their NDAs and basically put them in jail. I mean, I think that's what Grush was afraid of. And now, with the revelation of all this, quite obviously, David Grush had reason to be concerned about having any kind of a conversation, face to face or otherwise, with somebody like Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. So, the house of cards around Dr. Kirkpatrick has fallen, and it's falling hard, and it's going to continue to
Yep.
fall because of the brave act of Brandon Fugal. And I don't care, folks, if you disagree with me, you're welcome to disagree with me, but nothing is going to make me change my mind, because what we saw last night and all throughout today was the result of an honest man doing the right thing. And by that, make no mistake about it, folks, I'm talking about Brandon Fugal. And forgive me, folks, but fuck you if you can't accept that. And I know I normally don't use this language, and I do genuinely apologize, but that is how upset and that is how truly I feel about this kind of thing. Because it's time for all of this nonsense, all of this disinformation, all of these lies to stop. And when is the mainstream media going to wake up and realize that they've been a part of this cover up? And question is, have they been a part of it unknowingly, or have they been a part of it willingly? And I think that's going to come out eventually, one way or the other as well. But it just plays to what I've been talking about, folks. Things don't happen like that. There's a process involved. There's a process involved with whistleblowers like David Grush. There are people that, even after listening to the under oath sworn testimony of David Fravor and Ryan Graves, still have the balls, the audacity to say, we can't believe what these guys say. These are men that are tasked with the greatest responsibility in our nation of protecting us. But yet we're saying, well, you got
Yeah.
it wrong.
He's,
We
yeah.
have some video game coder or designer has the audacity to tell David Fravor that he's wrong, that he doesn't know what he really saw. I mean, come on. Who in their right mind is gonna say, yeah, I'm gonna pay attention to that guy? Good luck to you if that's how you actually if that's how you feel. I mean, what it comes down to, folks, is that the truth is out there. It's right there in front of you. But so many of you just refuse to do the homework to research it and find out. And just like with anything, you pick any topic out in the news today, you have to go to multiple sources to find out where the real truth is. And I know that there's still people out there that think that the guys like Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon and David Grush, that these guys are nothing but charlatans, and that they're lying and making all these claims that can't be substantiated, karma's going to come to collect, and karma's a bitch, and you're going to get bit by that bitch, and
Oh, yes.
you're going to become its bitch. Again, sorry for the colorful language, but that's how I feel. I understand that you're trying to use facts to support what you feel, and I'm just speaking from my heart. I don't have any inside knowledge. I don't have access to classified information. I don't have people whispering in my ear. For me, I just simply look at everything. I do a lot of reading and I use the brains, granted, very few brains that God gave me to help put some sense to all of this. So, to those of you that are out there that are like Roger and I, that have a genuine interest and a genuine passion for learning the truth about these things, don't lose hope. Keep in the fight, keep your head in the game, and support the people that are truly making a difference. And that would be people like Dr. Gary Nolan, people like Brandon Fugal, people like Dr. Travis Taylor, Eric Bard, anybody that is trying to move this process forward. Pay attention to what the Soul Foundation are researching and listen to what credible eyewitnesses, men and women that serve in the military, that have had personal encounters with these extraordinary anomalous phenomena or anomalous craft. There's something, they're very real. And that's one thing that we've learned is that in this hearing from 2018, Roger, Sean Kirkpatrick apparently was who began the meeting by saying, please skip to the part where you try to convince us that UAPs are real because we already know that they're real. Wow. That's completely the opposite of what Sean Kirkpatrick said in every public hearing and every interview that he's ever done while he was the director of AARO and since he's left office, right? I mean, where you just can't, you got to figure, folks, this guy was paid to lie to every single one of us. Take a moment to stop and think about that. This is information that has the potential to answer a question that mankind and humanity has had for millennia. Are we truly alone in the universe or on this planet? Is there another intelligence out there? Somebody knows the answer to that question. Maybe there are multiple answers to that question. But Sean Kirkpatrick and anybody like him do not want any of those answers coming out to people like me and you.
Exactly. Yeah. It's crazy the amount of disinformation out there and people that are, you know, in these positions that come out and just blatantly lie on behalf of a government. Um, and then like right now they're probably like, oh shit, what's going on, right? Like they've just been exposed as being like they have this information, they know this information, and they just got exposed. And so, kudos to Brandon Fugal and the different whistleblowers within the government saying like, no, these are things that are happening, right? Even though, you got people saying like, oh, don't look over here. We've got, this is what the real truth is.
Right.
But yeah, no, I'm glad to see people stand up for what's right. And, like there should be nothing wrong with the truth and giving people understanding. It shouldn't be for somebody's government to decide how somebody should feel, what they should think, what information should they be fed, right? That's not our democracy. That's not our republic. And I will defend that to the day I die, that, you know what, it's at least here for the United States, it's we the people, right? And we have a right to know these different things. So we're the ones that fund everything within the government. So kudos to the private corporations and things like Brandon Fugal that are continuing this research and not afraid to finally come out and say, like, look, you guys know enough's enough. And I'm sure Brandon has a lot more of that ammo for when things and people come after him.
Yeah.
So, because the bad thing is that I don't think it'll stop. It'll just increase the people that are panicking and worrying and they'll try to stir things up to make, people look bad, but it'll come back to bite them eventually again. And hopefully we're in a place that we, the people, can hold those people accountable.
I agree. And you said it with far fewer bits of profanity than I'm capable of. Folks, you got to see a little bit of the New York side of me come out tonight. And again, I do apologize for my language earlier. But that's just how passionately I am about this particular subject. It's a scary thing, and this doesn't matter whether you're right or left, Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. Doesn't matter. This is our constitutional republic, our democracy that we're talking about. To lend any possibility to the notion that the people that we elect and put in charge of this country are not, in fact, the ones making the decisions and calling the shots, or that are hiding information that has such far-reaching implications, you should be upset about that. You should be concerned about that, and you should want to get this matter resolved as expeditiously and as legally and ethically as possible. And again, folks, do not mistake my passion for believing that it's aliens or extraterrestrials. I don't know what any of this is. All that I know is that there is something truly extraordinary, something truly anomalous going on Skinwalker Ranch and in the skies of our nation, our airspace,
Places all over the world too, Jim.
all
It's
over
not
the
just,
world.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not just, I mean, there is some high strangeness here at Skinwalker Ranch, and you and I, we've been privy to some of that, and
And
even our
it's
own
not just because it's
experiences.
in Utah either. We know what some of you folks think about Utah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But yeah, no, it's I mean, there are hotspots all over the world, and you know, I think we need to come together as humanity, right?
Right.
This is not just a US concern. This has the potential to be life-changing for everyone around the world. If we are on the cusp of having unlimitless energy or things to create, stable portals, wormholes, things like that, things that we just never thought would ever happen or could be possible, right? That's going to scare a lot of people with a lot of money and power. And right, like that's again, this transcends politics. This transcends everything. This is about elevating the human condition, the discourse about where we are, what we're doing here in the universe, on our little world. There's a lot of meaning behind that. And I think we're just on the cusp of even just tapping into things that we have never dreamed are real. And I think it's up to all of us to continue to fight that fight and get that information out there to truly elevate the human race.
Again, Roger, you said it far more eloquently and politely than I've been able to articulate tonight. So, tip of the hat to you, my friend. And
I
yeah,
mean,
that's
I can drop a few if you want, but
no, no, no. We're already getting in a lot of trouble with some of our followers, I'm sure. And again, folks, truly, I apologize. It's just yeah, this kind of stuff gets to me, and I haven't had my tacos yet, so that's part of the problem too. Gotta, I'm not sleeping, and I need tacos. There we go. That's what I'm going to dismiss it as. But you're absolutely right, Roger. This is something that speaks to the human condition. It's not an American condition. It's not a. It's it respects no boundaries, no culture, no political ideology, none of that. It's a human issue, and it's an issue that should be rallying everybody together. And that's why I do have hope, because we do see people from disparate sides of the political aisle in the United States. I mean, seeing AOC and somebody like Tim Burchett in the same room and they're all of the same mind. When has that happened in the last 20 years where such polar opposites in political ideology
yep.
come together? and are agreed in focusing on this one issue that is truly has far-reaching ramifications and implications. So I do have hope. I do have hope that we are going to make progress on this. I'm not foolish enough to say that to put a timetable on it, but I think we're going to get some clarity sooner than later. And whether that has to happen in what they call a catastrophic manner, like we saw with Brandon Fugal, where Brandon Fugal had the documents and wasn't planning on playing that card, but some of the morons forced his hand, and guess what? You poke the bear. I'm sure you all heard FAFO, and that's exactly what happened. This particular debunker effed around, and he
Yep.
right, and he found out. FAFO, right? So yeah, that's kind of the way things have gone, and again, just want to say thank you to Brandon Fugal for having the courage to do what he did. Uh, I will acknowledge there are some folks that were adversarial in their viewpoint toward Brandon Fugal that are maybe slowly starting to change their tune and realize that maybe he has been telling us the truth all along. And I'll leave you folks with this one final thought before we say goodnight. Pay attention to the way people respond when people try dragging them through the mud or accuse them of horrible things. And I say, take a look at Brandon Fugal. Take a look at Lou Elizondo. Do they stoop to the same level as their detractors and do the same things? At least
Nope.
not open in public that we see. I'm sure Jeremy McGowan would like to disagree with me on that, but I don't care. I've got my own opinions on Mr. McGowan that I won't divulge in this particular time and space, but he's somebody else that likes to deal with slinging mud and throwing shade at people. And again, I'm a big believer in karma. And the people that really, truly do know things and that have been telling the truth all along, they're going to take that high road every time they can. And that's exactly what I think Brandon Fugal has done clear up to this point. They forced his hand and he showed him what he had.
Yeah. Well,
Simple as
Brandon is very, if you've ever seen his posts on Twitter or X, um, I would say, in my opinion, he doesn't go about demeaning people. Um, he's articulate with his point of view. He backs up his point of view with things that he has experienced or the evidence or the documentation that he has. And even he engages with his detractors, but he doesn't go down to the point where he's calling them names, mudslinging, dehumanizing them, calling them out. He sticks to his facts and he's polite and professional, which is in this day and age is very unheard of. People, especially when you want to hide behind the your phone because that person can't reach out and grab you, touch you, threaten you. There's a lot of big bullies out there that if you met face to face, they'd turn tail and run. Um, Kudos to Brandon and his team for having to endure such crap, in my opinion, and then, taking the high road and respectfully disagreeing with people and then showing why they disagree and backing that up with evidence. And again, I think Brandon has and Travis and everyone out there is working on the ranch. They have a lot of information that they just haven't had the time to share. And I think it will come down to, you know, when the time is right, they will share these things. And as Brandon has shown, like if there's a lot of stuff coming his way, right, he's going to put his foot down and be like, okay, enough's enough. I'm going to tell you my truth right here. And he backs it up. So kudos to everyone there.
completely agree. And that's what it comes down to, folks. Just take the high road. And I know I wasn't a great example of that tonight, but I am human after all. And again, the New Yorker in me, like with Brandon, pushed me far enough, and eventually that ugly part of Jim that I try to keep hidden most of the time, and successfully do most of the time. Uh, Occasionally, there are incidences where that unpleasant side of me does come out, and again, sincere apologies for my language earlier. But at the same time, I feel it needed to be said. So call that a half-hearted apology if you like, but uh, it is what it is. So again, Roger, thank you for this wonderful conversation that we've had. So much to cover in this episode. Uh, it's truly an exciting time to be alive and to watch all of this unfold. Um, just when I think Skinwalker Ranch, the secret of Skinwalker Ranch, couldn't possibly get more interesting and exciting and mind blowing, it does. And I think that momentum seems to be picking up, and I cannot wait until Tuesday when episode 4 airs to see what happens when they bring Jan back to the ranch. And
Yep.
to think of the fact that we have at least 10 more episodes to go uh, blows my mind. And we haven't even touched upon the two behind the gates episodes that aired after this last episode. I tell you, you want a good idea of what kind of person Brandon Fugal is? Watch the Behind the Gates episode that aired after this most recent episode. Brandon, you get to see a side of Brandon that far too often perhaps we don't get to see. And again, it just kind of shows, it speaks to his character and his integrity. And so many of the, in fact, all the guys that are out the ranch, I think, are cut from the same cloth. Uh, every single one of them. And that to me gives me great comfort and gives me hope that we will make headway, and we will at least figure out maybe a tiny piece of this great mystery that we're all trying to figure out there at Skinwalker Ranch. So thank you folks for watching. If you were able to make it this far, thank you. And if you like what you saw and heard, minus my profanity, then please feel free to hit that subscribe button to be notified every time Roger and I have new content. We post something at least once a week pertaining to the current season of Skinwalker Ranch and any other big uh, happenings that go on in the realm of the unexplained, be they UAP, UFO related, Bigfoot, cryptids, ghosts and hauntings, anything strange and unusual. That's what Roger and I are here to talk about and destigmatize as much as we can. So, thank you, folks, for following along. If you have any comments, uh, maybe be nice, be patient with me. Feel free to leave us some comments. Reach out to us on Facebook. We are the Soul of the Unexplained on Facebook, and we would love to hear from you. And Roger, we will be back next week to talk about episode 4. And we promise, folks, we're going to try to get back to the 5 minute or less summaries. It's just, gosh, there's been so much to try to condense into that short of a time frame. Just hasn't been. I haven't been able to
Yeah.
do it. Sorry.
Well, we'll do a better job of summarizing and making sure that these aren't you don't have to split these episodes up and listen, in multiple sittings. So do again appreciate all of our viewers for patiently listening, providing us feedback on what you want to hear, the topics that you love. Again, Jim and I are always passionate about what we do and are excited about, as you can see with this latest podcast. But yeah, I hope everyone has a safe week and look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Right on. And folks, don't forget that coming up this next Thursday, Jeff Freeman of the J Free 906 podcast is going to be having Eric Bard as his special guest to talk to us about how far things have come in the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch thus far. So it's guaranteed to be a fascinating and exciting conversation that Jeff Freeman is going to be having with Eric Bard of Skinwalker Ranch. So make sure, if you're not already, subscribe to the J Free 906 podcast YouTube channel right here on YouTube. Again, that's J Free, JFREE 906 is the name of the YouTube channel. Jeff Freeman is the dude, and he is one awesome guy who both Roger and I think the world of. So check out what he does, because he also does a weekly recap of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, and does it a lot more eloquently than Roger and I do with our cheap ass no frills podcast, right?
Exactly.
So make sure you check out and support Jeff Freeman and what he does there. Thank you, folks, and Roger and I will see you next time right here on the Soul of the Unexplained. See ya.